Let me get through this introduction quickly. Yes, we've already made this project, and no, it wasn't a very popular video. So why are we remaking it? Well, blame my OCD. We've since thought up a better way of doing it, a better order operations, and I think we can convey better table saw technique. So what is it? It is an in-drawer knife block. Now, I really do believe this is a great project. First of all, it's really practical. If you haven't got a large kitchen or much worktop space, it is much more space efficient, and it does make a really good gift. But also, as woodworkers, it's a really good project. It's nice and simple, it's cheap, it's fun, it uses woodworking tools that we all have, but uses them in a non-standard way, so it's a bit more interesting. So if you're a woodworker looking for a simple project, this is a really good one for you.
For this project, you need a block of wood that measures these dimensions. That makes us the perfect candidate to get something out of your scrap wood bin for a change. An old timber worktop would be the ideal option. We didn't have that, so we're going to use this nice piece of oak, but any food-safe hardwood will be fine. Since the block needs to be quite thick, we glued two pieces together. At the moment, the two pieces are a little bit oversized. That means if they squirm a little bit as they're being clamped together, it doesn't matter. Those uneven edges can all be machined away as we square it up and bring it down to size. We are loving our new planer thicknesser. We have done this project in the past with a benchtop thicknesser and the table saw, but this is just so much easier. One curious thing we've noticed is that Americans tend to put the narrow edge through the planer or jointer and then through the table saw to get the opposing edge parallel, whereas the recommendation with this tool is to put it through the thicknesser afterwards. To me, this sounds like a better approach because you're using much more accurate equipment, but if anybody understands the rationale behind the American approach, please do let us know. And please don't judge us by the burn marks you're about to see on the end of this oak. The blade's actually in reasonable condition. It's our technique that's poor, and that's forced by the dust collection and not being able to maneuver the saw as we'd like, something we're going to have to address at some point.
I now have a glued up block that's square and cut to size. The only slight issue I have is a deep crack running through this corner here. Now, I knew about that before glue up, and I'm not worried about it because I know that later in the project I can cut that away. So it's a good time to look at those corners and pick your best one and then orientate the part appropriately. For me, the next job is to cut slots in here that the knives will eventually sit into. And to do that, I'm going to run it through the saw up to a hard stop, then stop the saw, wait for that blade to spin down before backing it out, moving the fence along, and repeating the process till I have all my slots. And that's perfectly fine to do on a job site table saw, but there's not as much in-feed support as I'd like. Not a problem on a cabinet saw because this does tend to be deeper. But for me, it seems like a really good opportunity for me to use the fence extension that I built the other day. This has the advantage of having good in-feed support, but also I can mount various accessories, in this case a stop block. Before I go any further there, I need to raise the blade, and the blade needs to be just shallower than the depth of this first step. And I've set this accessory here so that I can raise the blade correctly. With that set, I then need to set my stop block location. And the way I want this to go is I want the blade to come along and then the arc of the blade to stop just 10 millimeters from the edge of the block. So the easiest way to do that is get a square, run it along the fence until you just touch the blade, make a pencil mark on the throat plate, and then measure 10 millimeters back from that direction. I then put the block onto that second mark. And I can move my stop block against the block and tighten it into place, and that should be my perfect location. That's all very easy with this fence stop block setup, but if you don't have this, I recommend clamping something to your stock fence or mounting something to the table and screwing it down. But whatever you do, you want that to be rock solid because you don't want that to be moving as you're working. Also, bear in mind that as you work, the fence is going to be moving this direction, so you don't want your stop block, if mounted to the table, to obstruct your fence. For me, that's me ready to make my first cut, and I'm going to be working from the woodworking plans that we have available for sale, which just tells me the dimension that I need. I set the fence to that dimension, and I just make my cut. If you're doing this for yourself, you're going to have to do a bit of maths to make sure all of those slots are equispaced based on your width. It gets a little bit confusing with blade kerf and all of that, but you can do it. I did it, so you can do it. Otherwise, just buy our plans.
Being new to YouTube but not the table saw, we've been struck by how many people like to comment on table saw safety practices, not just on our videos but videos across all the woodworking community. This being a non-standard cut, we wanted to make sure we were using as safe a practice as possible, so we did some research and we thought about it, and we think on balance the best approach is to stop the saw before retracting the part. Now, that is with a caveat that you hold the part firmly and securely while you reach down to turn the saw off, and you observe standard table saw safety practices. All in all, as we have the saw set up here, it felt like a very easy cut to do and we had no concerns whatsoever. I then marked up the block for the location of the steps and was sure to mark on all 6 faces, as that comes in really handy later on. To cut the steps into the knife block, I'll start that at the miter saw using the depth stop feature, and to do this I need the part to sit further away from the fence, so I'll put a block between the fence and my part. I then engage the depth stop, set it to the correct height, and run as many passes as I have patience for on each step. Again, I'm going to have a rant about the dust collection on this saw. We have this third-party adapter on it which improves dust collection, but it really limits how we're able to use the saw. You can see how often I'm banging it against the part during this operation. I then need to remove the remaining material from the steps. A bandsaw would be the perfect tool for the job here, but sadly our one's just not up to the job, so we'll be using the table saw instead. I set the fence to the desired thickness of that step and then run it through the saw until I see the blade nearly touching that second step. I then have to rotate the part, move the fence over until I see that the cuts align, and repeat the operation. This will of course leave a small triangle that still needs to be removed. A handsaw will make short work of removing those. I then repeated for the second step. I then found that one of those cracks had run deeper into the timber than I'd anticipated, leaving this large splinter here. If this was a plastic or metal part, it would be going in the trash right now, but because it's wood, and one of the things I love about woodworking is I can apply a little bit of glue, a wooden wedge, clamp overnight, and it will be as good as new. The steps now need a bit of cleaning up. There's a few ways I can go about this, but I'm going to start with a router in the corner of those steps just to give me a nice sharp edge to work from. We used a nice sharp chisel to remove the bulk of the material. I was almost certainly more thorough than I needed to be with the chisels, because the sander with 150 grit pad does an amazing job of cleaning up that surface. If you don't believe just how effective the sander is, just look at those burn marks and look how quickly the sander takes care of them. "51 seconds and we go from that horrible burnt mess to a surface that's ready to take finish. I then put a 3mm chamfer on all the edges. If you do it in this order of operations, then you should have minimised the risk of having any tear out. Also, it's worth saying that the bearing rides over those knife slots without any hesitation at all. The router can't quite get into the corners, so you'll need a chisel to clean that up. If you go across the grain first and then with the grain, you'll get the best results. And then every woodworker's favourite time, it's time to sand it. Thankfully, most of it can be sanded with the power sander, but you will need to break out the sandpaper just to break the edges of those knife slots. And finally, to apply a food grade finish. A raw linseed oil or food grade mineral oil works great, or our go-to finish is this Fiddy's hard wax oil. There's a link down below if you're interested.
I completely forgot to make this part here. So I've got an offcut that I've marked up. I'm going to cut it out quickly and then work out how I'm going to attach it to a finished piece.
This piece is quite small, and because you want to match the wood grain of the main part, it can be a little bit tricky to cut out. The best way I found to do this is at the cross-cut sled, marking everything out beforehand and making all your cuts so the part isn't released until that final cut. And again, this piece will need a 3mm chamfer to match the main block. Because it's quite small, it can be a bit tricky, but if you put it in the vise and do it in this order of operations, you'll minimise tear out and keep yourself safe. To minimise burning, you'll want to run the router as slow as possible while moving it as quickly as you're comfortable, but as you can see here, it's still difficult to remove burning altogether. Thankfully, it's quite easy to remove with a bit of sandpaper. The way I'd like to attach this block is with wood glue, but since I've already applied finish to the main block, I'm going to use dowels instead. By drilling the dowels in the pillar drill, I know I'm going to create them completely square and I should end up with a flush finish. I then put in these dowel centering pins, which will help me transfer the exact location of these holes onto the main block. And with the dowel location defined, I then go back to the pillar drill to drill those two holes. It's nice when a plan comes together. And just in case you were wondering, this is the location of that crack that I fixed earlier. I think you'll agree it's completely disappeared. And there you have it, a finished knife block. If you did enjoy this project and you'd like to build one for yourself, please do remember there's plans linked down below. There's a 7 knife and a 9 knife variant in those plans. If not, then please do comment, let us know what you think, and give the video a like and subscribe. Otherwise, until next time, cheerio!